this year's last strategic planning committee. We'll make a start, seeing as it's not right while I'm in here again. Right, membership of the committee. Adam, you're here for Bill, yeah? Right. Item 2, declarations of interest in lobbying. So I'll start off with Councillor Sokol.
Yeah, Chair. Item 7 on page 5. Yeah, I received some emails from, I think, Councillor Martin Bolt and one or two objectors, but I did not take any action. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, the same for me. Email from Councillor Bolt with the Murfield Town Council. Yeah.
Here we.
Councillor Pattison.
Yeah, the same for me. Item 7, no action taken.
Councillor Pinnock.
Item 7, Chair, but from Councillor Bolt and from a representative of the objectors. I think actually representing Murfield Town Council.
Look, I can't hear the meeting. So how do I do it? I don't know when they call him.
Is there somebody online somewhere?
It's him. It was his voice.
No, it sounds like it. But it's
Oh,
not.
did it? Oh, it wasn't. He's denying it anyway.
Rowan Christmas.
Deanery, Becky's had the partnership agreement back, hasn't had the actual accounts. Do you know if they could send back?
No idea. I think Kerry's going to sign the parts meeting.
Have we got cross wires somewhere?
That sounded like Deborah, but perhaps it wasn't.
conversation you have with, I mean, it doesn't, obviously this is, it is a one-off. I mean, normally it's very straightforward, but oh yeah, I think they can view. I think they can see. And if it doesn't, yeah, well, I've already messaged them to say that's your option. Yeah.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
Thanks, lobbying. So now we'll go to Councillor Gregg.
Item number 7, Chair. I've received some emails, one from Councillor Bolt and another objector. No advice has been given. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. 2 emails, no action taken.
And myself, 2 emails, no action taken. Right, address of the public. Let's hope it carries on being in the public. Any public questions?
Chair.
Deputations and petitions?
None received, Chair.
Right. First application, page 5. This is application number 2021 91914, and it is Northope Lane, Murfield. And it's Richard.
Just waiting for the presentation to come up, Chair.
Yep.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Gilbert, Senior Planner in the Majors and Minerals Planning Team. Item 7 on the agenda is application 2021-91914. The proposal has been submitted under a full application for demolition of 1 dwelling and the erection of 44 dwellings with access and associated infrastructure. In terms of a minor correction, the committee agenda contents pages, both on the council webpage and in the public reports pack, state 39 dwellings for item 7. This is incorrect, as item 7 proposes 44 dwellings, which is reflected in the development description, both on the application webpage and the report within the report pack. It can also be confirmed that the latest consultation was undertaken with the correct development description stating 44 dwellings and supplemented by all the requisite updated plans. Members should also have received a hard copy of a representation on behalf of Murfield Town Council and local ward members, which was issued to officers yesterday. Moving back to the proposal itself, the site is allocated as Housing Site 69 in the local plan with an indicative yield of 48 dwellings. To date, the application has received 268 representations, which have been responded to within the committee report and the committee update. The application is located to the north of the town of Murfield in an area known as Northorpe. The application site is located on land at the rear of 28 Northorpe Lane. 28 Northorpe Lane, pictured top left, will be required to be demolished to provide suitable access into the site at the northwest corner of the red line boundary pictured on the previous slide. The highway verge where a lay-by is proposed is also pictured. The development site is formed of semi-improved grassland which topographically decreases in gradient to the south and east. The site is bound by residential properties with dwelling houses on Northorpe Lane set to the west and those on Northorpe Court located to the south. An abandoned railway embankment is located to the east, which is characterised by dense woodland. The northern boundary is shared with open agricultural land that, in planning policy terms, is designated as Greenbelt. Northorpe Hall, Northorpe Barn and Northorpe Croft are Grade 2 listed buildings set northwest of the site. In respect of planning application history, there is an outline permission approved by Strategic Committee in 2020, which agreed the principle of the access into the site. This included the provision of a lay-by within the highway verge, set opposite the proposed entrance. This application before members today is not related to the 2020 outline permission, as it is a full application in its own right. However, the principle of a similar access layout, inclusive of the lay-by, is maintained under this application as set out on the slide. The access layout is proposed with a simple priority junction with a lay-by so as not to displace existing on-street parking. This slide presents the layout as it was initially submitted by the applicant. Members should note that there were a number of significant design issues with this arrangement. For instance, the majority of the proposed dwelling plots back onto the woodland on the embankment, thereby closing off and hiding this positive feature from view. The location of these plots along the eastern boundary was also identified by local residents as being prone to flooding. Similarly, the entrance to the site would be characterised by 2 isolated dwelling houses set in cramped positions between neighbouring boundaries and the proposed estate road to the detriment of the proposal's appearance and the amenity of 26 Northorpe Court. Through subsequent revisions, the design of the proposal has been altered so that the entrance to the site is green, tree-lined and attractive. Plots have also been moved away from the eastern boundary so that they are not within an area at risk of flooding. These properties have also been reoriented to face onto and have a view of the woodland along the embankment, thereby making the street scene more open, attractive and less insular. As regards the appearance of the houses themselves, these have also been significantly improved in refinement of their detailing, articulation and variety in order to prevent an identikit style that would otherwise detract from the character of the local area. In addition, all of the proposed dwellings meet and exceed the nationally described space standards, and nearly all dwellings achieve sufficient parking space standards that meet the Highway Design Guide SPD. The applicant is currently revising the layout of the affordable white beam units to ensure that they achieve the minimum parking standard. With regard to the internal estate road, a footway runs throughout the majority of the site up to private drives, and it has been confirmed by Kirklees Highways that gradients and sight lines are at adoptable standards. In respect of the drainage design, the scheme is able to accommodate surface water for a 1 in 100 year storm event, inclusive of the 30% uplift for climate change. The storage is in the form of a culvert to be located in the area indicated by blue blocks on the plan. The resultant discharge for surface water alongside foul will be pumped to a combined sewer located on Northorpe Lane. The requirement for a pumping station has been arrived at due to the railway embankment preventing a viable gravity solution from being provided. This design has been agreed by the principal engineer from the lead local flood authority, who is in attendance today. In terms of planning contributions, the application has been subject to an independent viability review, which determined that the site was financially viable. Following subsequent negotiations with the applicant, a full suite of planning contributions have been agreed in principle. These include 20% on-site affordable housing, approximately £80,000 for public open space improvements to Crossley Lane rec ground, approximately £59,000 for off-site measures to achieve a 10% biodiversity net gain, just under £26,000 for the provision of metro bus passes for new occupants of the site, as well as £23,000 for a real-time display upgrade to an existing bus stop on the northern side of Shillbank Lane and a new bus stop on the opposite side of the road. Given that the application is for a residential development on an allocated housing site, with a satisfactory design and full complement of developer contributions, the proposal is found to be acceptable in planning policy terms and is recommended for approval to committee, subject to the list of conditions set out in the committee report and amended under the committee update, and also through subject to a 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Right, we've got quite a few speakers. First is, I apologise already if I've got your name wrong. Deepika Kaushal. Oh, God. Right, you've got 3 minutes starting now.
Okay, thank you. My name is Deepika Kaushal. I'm the CEO of Northorpe Hall Child and Family Trust. We are a charity that works with children, young people and families in areas of mental health, emotional and well-being. Northorpe Hall is our main site for service users from 8 AM to 8 PM on weekdays and Saturday mornings. Outside of this, our barn is used for events between Friday and Sunday most weekends. Speaking on behalf of the Trust, we are objecting to this application for a number of reasons as follows. The first one is the impact on the charitable and wider activity. There is a direct effect, as we can see from the plans, and detriment to the charity as the verge is part of Trust land, and we do not agree to the taking of this land from the charity. We have over 5,000 children and young people accessing services every year and have concerns regarding road safety of service users, staff and communities who will be affected by this development. The site holds events and functions most weekends, and parking becomes the issue. And parking becomes an issue, but is currently managed. With added development, this will detrimentally affect the access and manageability of traffic due to the increase in the number of cars and footfall, and further impact on event hire, which will be at a detriment of our charity, as it provides much needed income. Second reason for objection is as the landowner, the Trust stands by the fact that the grass verge is not part of the highways land. The hall is of historical significance and a listed building. The grassland, path, stone wall are part of the site. Legal advice has been taken and confirms we are the legal owner of this piece of land, as it falls predominantly within the title of 53 Northorpe Lane, This has been reconfirmed by correspondence with the Council in February 2022, where the correspondent confirmed he was aware that the verge outside the Trust property is not part of the adopted highway, therefore not proposing any changes to this area as part of works. Thirdly, as landowner, we remain responsible for the maintenance of the grass verge. Permission has always been sought if external agencies have been carrying out work on or adjacent to this piece of land. The British Gas has always sought permission when they've needed to use or place something on the land, and residents have sought permission for us to use a verge on several occasions. The council have noted that they have cut the grass on this piece of land, but this was never formally agreed, and we are currently actively maintaining this piece of land. Finally, as landowner, there is historical evidence of the verge not being part of highways. Residents' testimony confirm this, and basically we have submitted our objection and do feel that the verge is trust land. Thank you.
Next up is Lucy Ashen.
Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. As a practising civil engineer specialising in urban drainage, I have serious concerns around the drainage strategy of this proposed development. In my opinion, it's completely inappropriate, and we should work with nature, store rainwater on a property-by-property basis and think of it as a resource rather than hiding it away in huge concrete tanks. The proposed box culvert used to store surface water will use over 700 tonnes of carbon-intensive concrete. For a sense of scale, it's the length of a football pitch and I could walk through it. You've got to remember that each section weighing over 7.5 tonnes will have to be transported to site on large wagons. Huge cranes will also be required to lift them into place. Has any thought gone into how this will get up Northorpe Lane? I sometimes struggle to get my Honda Jazz up there. The development also has 40% net biodiversity loss. In terms of drainage, there's a real missed opportunity here for high-quality vegetated suds. Green swales, rain gardens and detention ponds could store the water on the surface, as well as providing amenity and biodiversity. Given the climate emergency and Kirklees Council's own commitments to net zero, we need to ask for more from new housing developments. There is also no guarantee of Yorkshire Water adopting the culvert, hydrobrake, flow control and pumping station. I know for a fact that Yorkshire Water don't like hydrobrakes in their schemes as they block and are difficult to access and maintain. Sewage pumping stations are also notorious for blocking and failing, causing localised flooding. I don't think that a development that requires so much energy and disruption to build, operate and maintain its drainage network can be considered sustainable. I do also worry about the ability of a property developer to safely deliver a project of this complexity and scale. It's real heavy civil engineering with large retaining walls and deep excavations. This site also has a high groundwater table and a history of springs present throughout. Excavations could flood with groundwater and the site could very easily turn into a dangerous mud bath that could kill someone. It should also be noted that the receiving sewer network in this area is overloaded. The downstream combined sewer overflow spilled raw sewage 33 times in 2021 for a total of 124 hours into the River Calder. Allowing this development to discharge to the combined sewer will only make this worse. In conclusion, I think the use of the word sustainable in association with the proposal is blatant greenwashing, and we as residents should not accept poor quality design in new developments. The planet deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sarah Hurst.
We've reviewed the developers' submissions and in particular their site assessments. Members will have reviewed the application documentation in detail and will be familiar with this site. It slopes away from the road and is subject to waterlogging in the lower sections. In order for the developer to lift the proposed houses above the water to create level pads on which to build, their engineers state that 17,000 cubic metres of fill material will be required. That equates to at least 32,000 tonnes. All of this material will have to be brought to site using 20-tonne trucks like this, industry standard, which means that at least 1,600 deliveries will have to be made. Effectively, that's 3,200 traffic movements of 20-tonne trucks along this narrow lane, just to prepare the site. And this is before one brick, block or roof tile has been delivered. These are exceptionally high quantities for a site of this size, significantly above what would usually be required, but which are due to the adverse ground conditions that exist. Of course, the developers could opt for slightly smaller trucks, but that would only result in even more deliveries. The number of vehicle movements doesn't account for works in removing the demolished buildings or carting away contaminated land and waste, which again will require the use of the same trucks. None of this construction traffic has been factored into the traffic assessment for this site. It's been completely ignored despite repeated concerns being raised about road safety. The council has previously refused to allow the local stables to access their premises from Northorpe Lane, citing that the increased traffic volume from visitors was unacceptable. So why is the council now turning a blind eye to 44 new dwellings and the significant additional traffic volume this will create? Why have the rules been changed? It's well known that traffic assessments for new housing are out of date and flawed. Planning committee members have already stated in public hearings that they consider the traffic calculations for new developments to be inadequate and have required other developments to be redesigned based on more realistic numbers, but not when it comes to this site. Why? The road junctions with Northorpe, Crossley and Shillbank lanes already pose a problem for users. The prospect of what amounts to several thousand constructional vehicle movements is a significant road safety issue, and the additional traffic burden from 44 dwellings has been clearly and deliberately underestimated. It cannot be acceptable for residents to have to manage road safety issues themselves when trucks become stuck, as in this case from a few weeks ago when the residents had to assist the driver to reverse out of the lane and across the road junctions. Committee members have an obligation to challenge and interrogate planning applications and not simply rubber stamp officer recommendations, particularly in cases where inaccurate and misleading information has been knowingly accepted as part of the application process. As with this site in relation to traffic, both during construction and when built. You cannot ignore these road safety issues, and for these reasons I ask that this planning application is refused.
Next on Teams is Dominic Bowen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Yeah, I support the landowner and the residents group Safe Northorpe. I oppose the planning application regarding the illegality of the use of the grass. There have been no new facts disclosed during these last 2 years. Therefore, we do not see how a barrister for planning authority, shown our barrister's advice, could possibly find differently. You can trust our barrister's advice disclosed in February last year. He's independent. He, in fact, actually regularly acts for Kirklees planning on other matters. On all key factual issues, the council have no case. The 2022 council's definitive map shows that the verge is not part of the extent of the road. So do all the other maps going right the way back. In fact, in 1854, the Ordnance Survey map shows Northorpe Lane not existing yet. However, the perimeter wall of Northorpe Hall, the landowner's property, had already been built 150 years earlier than that in 1704. We know this because Kirklees Council's own expert, Mr. Thornborough, said so. Well, why is that important? It's important because the only possible issue raised by the council means that the council has to show that the placement of the wall was with reference to an existing road, Northorpe Lane in this case. But when they were building the wall in 1704, Northorpe Lane didn't exist for at least another 150 years, as we can see from the 1854 map. Clearly, builders in 1704 didn't have a road in mind which didn't exist for another century plus when they were building the wall in 1704. And that is how far away the council are from being legally able to use this grass verge. Now, you've heard from the landowner that there's a parking space there for exclusive use of the people, the employees or guests of the landowner. There's actually been a private garage on that verge. We have residents, quite elderly residents, who can give evidence of a garage being there since the 30s. It was demolished in 1991. And at no point did the council, planning authority, dispute that that garage was anything other than the landowner using their own land for their private purposes. They even put a dropped curb to the site of that garage, which is no longer there, to facilitate the private use of what was clearly private land and not highways land. So any historical argument is frankly nonsense. Our barrister's written opinion of February 2021 was provided in the attempt to have a proper ventilation of the issues. But the Kirklees barrister advice we only found out about 1 week ago, after 22 months of our advice being on the table. The Kirklees barrister advice has not been provided still. And as I understand it, not even you've seen it. Well, how is this a meaningful consultation? How can this be a proper consultation on what is supposed to be a Grampian condition, a condition precedent of any work starting? And that is my submission.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next is Stephen Bowen. Ashen, sorry.
Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. I have a bachelor's degree, honours degree in mechanical engineering. I've lived in Northorpe for 22 years to speak for local residents. Land registry records clearly show the Northorpe Hall Trust own land which is key to securing access to the development. The Trust will not sell this land to a developer. It would endanger their client's safety as well as that of residents. Kirklees Highways allege the Hall's land is part of the highway and with planning department support proposed to construct a lay-by on the Hall's land as the only method to facilitate access to the applicant's site. Kirklees have been requested several times to provide documents backing their claim that the Hall's land is highway, but have so far failed to do this conclusively. Northorpe residents engaged our own specialist barrister to examine the status of the trust-owned verge. We sent our barrister's legal advice to Kirklees in February 2021, outlining the strength of our arguments and the evident weaknesses in Highway's opinion. We then requested the council to share their barrister advice, backing their opinion. Kirklees have never shared council's advice on this matter. If they have nothing to hide, why not share it? So we are left with the Highways Department opinion as just one of bluster. It is as if they are their own judge, jury and accountable only to themselves. How can this be right and democratic? It is clearly not transparent and it shows a complete failure of leadership and lack of moral fibre within the Highways Department. Who are our local planning authority officers accountable to? Only themselves? Officers clearly want to mark their own homework on this matter. Northorpe residents see this as a deplorable behaviour and conduct falling far short of the standards expected in public office. Land registry records clearly show the verge in question to be owned by Northorpe Hall Trust. Nothing takes place on the verge without the express permission of the trust as landowner. Northorpe Hall Trust previously had a garage on this land from the 1930s which went completely unchallenged by Kirklees Highways Department. We have a former Northorpe Lane resident born in 1928 living in Murfield who played hide and seek under the garage in the 1930s. Former Murfield Town Councillor Jim Sykes lived in Northorpe and was familiar with the residents. If the verge was council highways, clearly Councillor Sykes would have taken action against the Barker family of the Northorpe Hall if they had taken it upon themselves to illegally build their garage and access path on council highway. Note this path still exists today. Several other local residents played on the green by the garage in their youth with the permission of the vicar managing the charity. The trust took down the garage itself when the structure weakened, but nevertheless still park on its footprint today, as I show you here, a trust car. If this land was part of the highway, then the council would have prevented any garage from ever being erected there. This application is presented on a shambolically flawed assumption. The only reasonable decision for this committee to take is to reject this application. There is no possible access to this site. This car is the estate manager of Northorpe Hall Trust, parked only with their permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jackie Ashen.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, thank you. I would like to point out, good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. I would like to point out the following misrepresentations and omissions in the report for today's committee hearing, which means you received an unfair representation of the development and its impact on
Jackie, could you put your camera on, please?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Could you put your camera on, please?
My camera on? Okay, hang on a second.
Could Dominic turn his off, please? Right, Jackie, we can see you now.
Okay. So the opening summary states the development will consist of 1- and 2-storey units. However, within the hidden depths of the report, it clearly shows that 25 of the proposed 44 dwellings are over 2-storey. As many people will miss this and just go with the opening summary, I find this to be a complete misrepresentation of the development. The report also highlights that the development is below recommended limits for off-street parking. Some dwellings don't have adequate distances between them. Some dwellings don't have adequate private outdoor amenity. One of the house types is below the standard for internal space, unless you include the garage. Distances between the new dwellings and existing dwellings violate the 21-metre rule in some instances. Surely this indicates that the proposed development is overcrowded. Instead of reducing the number of houses as a result of areas of the site being unsuitable, they've been crammed into the remaining usable space to help meet housing targets, with complete disregard for both the existing residents and the new residents. Lots of existing residents raise concerns about the loss of light and privacy they will endure as a result of the development having numerous three-storey houses and being too close to their boundaries. Many describe the development as being completely overbearing and unacceptable. The report tries to justify this as acceptable due to some of the existing dwellings being at a higher ground level than the new ones. However, what it doesn't highlight is that some of the existing dwellings are at a lower ground level than the new three-storey dwellings, as well as violating the 21-metre rule between the new and existing. This submission again makes me conclude that the report is misleading and not fit for purpose. I ask that you reject this application. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Jackie, for that. Next is John Fitzsimmons.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a planning barrister, Chair, in Cornerstone Barristers, and I appear on behalf of local residents. You've heard various submissions from the residents about their concerns in relation to this application, and I won't repeat them in detail. I just want to draw together and emphasise 3 issues that you have to consider and urge you to refuse this matter or adjourn and seek further information in respect of each of them. First, you've just heard from residents about how there's various errors, omissions and gaps in this officer's report. You are the decision makers here. You cannot simply defer to your officer if there is further information that can be made available which you believe will assist you in reaching the right decision, like information in respect of road safety issues that Ms. Hurst touched on. So I would urge you to defer until you have that information. Second, there's a key piece of information I think you should be asking for. I hope you'll have seen the opinion from Mr. Riley-Smith on behalf of residents, where he sets out in some great length and detail why he's of the firm view that the much debated verge doesn't form part of council land and does in fact belong to the trust, who of course you've heard from today and have confirmed that. And I endorse and agree with Mr. Riley-Smith's views. But in your officer's report, you're told that the council has received a separate council's opinion and that this has provided the comfort required to proceed to a recommendation. Now, I haven't seen that opinion, and nor have my clients, and it may be that the council won't share it with my clients. But you're being asked to take a decision to recommend approval on the basis of an opinion that you haven't seen. You always have access to the consultation documents underlying an officer's report, but you haven't had access to this. And in my view, without seeing that opinion and without being confident and satisfied as to its contents, I don't think you can in full confidence proceed today. Third, and finally, I want to touch on heritage. I was concerned when I read your officer's report at paragraph 10.83, where he notes that it's accepted there will be less than substantial harm to the setting of the listed buildings. But then the officer simply says in the same paragraph that such harm is significantly outweighed by the public benefits of this proposal. But nowhere in the report does your officer acknowledge that even though the harm may be less than substantial, the MPPF and case law requires that great weight be given to that harm. So in granting permission, you have to be satisfied that the great weight to be given to any heritage harm, including less than substantial harm, is outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme. And without any confirmation from KC Conservation that that's their position, that they've given this harm great weight, I find it difficult to see on what basis you can make that judgment. So on the basis of those three matters, I ask you to just pause and seek further information and at the very least adjourn today.
Thank you. Final speaker is Richard Moat.
Chair, members of the committee, I'm Richard Mowat, the planning agent acting on behalf of Newark Homes, and I very much welcome the opportunity to present our proposals to you this afternoon. First, I would like to thank the planning officer who has since taken over the application has worked proactively to ensure all material matters have been addressed comprehensively. We clearly support the recommendation to delegate approval of the application to the Head of Planning and Development. This site is allocated for housing in the Kirklees local plan, which was a key driver behind Newark Homes submitting a full planning application in May 2021. In terms of the development, it is our intention to deliver 44 dwellings, 20% of which will be affordable dwellings. The final mix and tenure is agreed with input from the Head of Planning and Development. Further, the scheme is now fixed so as to ensure the visual and residential amenity of neighbouring properties are protected in perpetuity. Full weight has also been attached to the provisions set out in the Household Design Guide SPD, which include properties designed to meet National Described Space Standards, design approach and facing materials which are considered to be aesthetically appropriate, front to property landscaping including street trees, robust boundary treatments which restrict views from the north, a positive frontage relationship with the wooded area covering the former railway embankment, and attractive entrance which should be seen as a focal point when viewing the site from Northope Lane. As a consequence, the final quantum of development, whilst below the indicative yield set out in the local plan, provides for a more attractive scheme which responds appropriately to the character and appearance of the surrounding area. The proposed development has been assessed having full regard for relevant policies as set out in the local plan and other material considerations, and in this context there are no outstanding technical issues. Further, a comprehensive package of financial and future management measures will be secured through the Section 106 package. As a consequence and subject to the provision of suitably worded conditions, it is considered that the proposed development constitutes sustainable development and therefore the officer's recommendation should be supported by the committee. Thank you.
Right. Members, it's up to you. Councillor Davis and then Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, thanks for the contributions. A key area seems to be the discussion clearly over the verge. So I'd like to ask officers if they could provide clarification on that issue, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, mine's the same question. But if I remember rightly, when we gave outline permission, one of the conditions was that this issue would be sorted out. So is it?
So, through you, Chair, as stated in the presentation, this is a full application. It's not related to the outline. It's not a reserved matters application. However, it has nearly the same layout in the access design, which obviously members of the previous committee, strategic committee in 2020 approved. Nothing has really changed since then, other than the council opinions being gained. The council opinions have been obviously, they're legally privileged from the Highways Authority, and those haven't been shared, should it be challenged by Northope Hall Trust, and that's common in these circumstances. In terms of the purposes of the actual planning application, which only requires 21 days notice to be served on any other landowners, that has been satisfied by the applicant. So as far as the planning application and material considerations are concerned, those have been satisfied.
Mark, did you indicate? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the verge, I apologise for maybe not listening correctly, but I'm not sure that I got an answer from the previous questions. I was just wondering if there was any clarification on the land, as some of the speakers have said that there is conflict there about who owns the trust land, etc. Could you give me clarification on that?
Through you, Chair. So part of that verge is owned by the local highways authority, and part of it is owned by the local, by the Northolt Hall Trust. There's obviously a dispute there as to how much of that is split between, and hence why there's a Grampian condition there. But as I previously mentioned, in the purposes of land ownership, in terms of a material planning consideration for the planning application, that has been satisfied through the 21-day notification period.
Yeah, I've just got a couple more questions, Chair, please. Sorry, did you want to cover some of that?
This point about this verge, I hear what the representations are saying about the ownership of the verge. We have looked into this extensively. It was a very significant part of the original outline application at this site. Could this lay-by be created? The view that we've arrived at, and the reason that planning permission exists already at the site to create a lay-by, is that the council can do this work. If that view is contested, the appropriate course of action is through the courts, not through this planning committee. If there is a legal challenge, you need to launch that legal challenge. I'm not inviting it, but that is the due process, because we are at a point where planning permission exists to create that verge, to create that lay-by in that verge. And if the owners of the land think that they can challenge that, it's through the courts. This planning application in front of you today is identical in terms of the lay-by element. There is no material change of planning circumstances that I can give you. And the issues that are being identified, they are land issues and they are not for the planning decision. And that's the appropriate course of action. Hope that helps. Thank you. Thank you.
Deborah, do you want to come in at that point?
Sorry, I was going to say something very similar to what Matthias has expressed. This isn't a court of law to determine land ownership matters. The council is of the firm opinion that the verge can be accommodated, the lay-by can be accommodated within the verge. And as Matthias has said, we're proceeding on that basis with comfort from our own council's opinion.
Right, thanks, Deborah. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. It's funny, isn't it? When I was listening to what the local people were saying, I thought, how on earth did this site get put into the local plan in the first place? And I do wonder whether a lot of the issues that they raise came out at the planning inquiry. I mean, if they didn't, then there's something quite seriously wrong with the system, it seems to me. But firstly, I am not satisfied at all that we have got an opinion that says we are okay to use the land in order to create a lay-by. Why can't we see the words of that opinion? Because it just seems to me that we would be giving the impression of riding roughshod over private rights, because there does seem to be a dispute between the private rights of Northolt Hall and the local authority in general. In other words, it is said that part of this is part of the public highway, the other part owned by Northolt Hall. Well, let's see the evidence, please, because I do not feel inclined to go ahead with this unless we can actually see that evidence. I don't think it is sensible procedure on our part to, as one of the objectors said, to just take this on trust. The council's opinion has said it's all right. Where's the evidence? I'm sorry. I just think this is a very high-handed way of behaving, and I'm not satisfied with it. There are other issues that the objectors raised, and I would like some answers, if possible. Firstly, drainage it was said that what is proposed is not sustainable, not in the sense that we would like to think it is. And that we have emphasised over many planning applications that any development that takes place has got to be sustainable. And we are being told by somebody who gives a professional qualification that it is not sustainable. So is there another way of doing it? There's an issue about construction traffic, which was brought up, simply because some earth has got to be moved into the site. That's not sustainable either, frankly, because one shouldn't be shifting piles of earth around, if at all possible. And then the suggestion was made that traffic assessments are out of date. Now, without being able to question the person who made that assertion, I don't know whether that's true. I have some experience of taking traffic assessments from highways officers on planning committees, and I would generally think that they are because they're based on evidence from all over the country, that there is some sense behind them. I would just like comfort on that, because it is a bit difficult to make the assertion that these things are out of date without being able to back up the evidence. At the moment, I'm not happy with this. And at the very least, I would like it deferred, but I'll leave that be for the moment. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. When I said there were a few points that Andrew brought up, so apart from traffic and counting movements and etc. So we're clear. Andrew's up first.
Hi, I'm Mr. Martin Stevenson, Kirklees Council Lead Local Flood Authority Officer. With regard to the drainage comments, it is understood that the site will not drain by gravity because of the presence of an abandoned railway embankment. That has required the introduction of a surface water pumping station. My understanding is that is with Yorkshire Water to consider for adoption, and that would be the case. If they get it adopted, that would then be obviously being maintained. If it's not adopted, it would be up to a maintenance company to maintain it. With regard to the storage medium, it is an industry standard acceptable way of storing surface water. Attenuation is in culverted storage. Ideally, we would like to see things like basins and things like that, but obviously that's on a site-by-site basis. Thank you.
I was just going to add more to what Martin had said there, so thanks for your comments, Martin. In terms of the drainage design, I think as members will be aware, sustainable, like permeable basins and things like this are difficult in Kirklees because of the ground type, which is clay, so they're not feasible, and that's why tanks and culverts are generally preferred solutions. And in terms of the sustainability as a planning consideration, that does not generally kind of come down to the type of attenuation storage. It's the performance of that storage and whether it's able to accommodate the water on site and not create flooding off site or on site. And the drainage design does provide that in this instance. In terms of the pumping station, understood that I think the representative cited potentially having storage on a dwelling-by-dwelling basis. It's better to have one pumping station in this instance than to have 44 mini pumping stations, which could then be under the responsibility of each occupier, and it decreases the liability and shares that across the entire site, as opposed to just on one occupier who might have the responsibility of replacing quite an expensive pumping station. So the solution is better in that instance. In terms of Councillor Pinnock's mention of the council opinion, I'll bring Deborah Wilkson, the Senior Legal Officer, now.
I think the point here is that this is a planning committee and we're discussing the planning aspects of this. There is a legal opinion which our council has obtained from a barrister in response to the objector's opinion, which is what happens if we get a council's opinion in. We take our own, and professional officers, legal officers, are paid to look at these opinions and then report those matters to members. We don't expect members to pore over council's opinion and come to their own view, in the same way that there are drainage reports and highway reports. Members rely on professional officers to inform them by way of the officer report. So it does exist, it's not secret, and it does give us, the council, the opinion that we can proceed with this application.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, through you. On the transport matters, yeah, a transport assessment was submitted with this particular application. I think one of the important things to mention with this is, from an access and traffic impact point of view, this is pretty much identical to what was the existing approval. The TA that's submitted some of it does rely on the previous TA, which was done in 2019. The application was 20, still considered to be reasonably up to date. What was any sufficient changes since then? The point about construction traffic, that hasn't been assessed. The amount of, I don't know, the lady who spoke mentioned a degree of cut and fill. That hasn't been assessed as part of this application. I think it's accepted during any construction there will be some disruption. I wouldn't know to agree or dispute with the figures that were mentioned, because it's something that we don't know about. What we are proposing as conditions is a pre and post conditions on survey of Northrop Lane. So if construction traffic damage during construction, there would be a condition to ensure it was put back. It would be inspected. That's a joint survey with the Highway Authority, and also a construction management plan, which would manage construction traffic as appropriately to minimise impact on the community and things like school traffic, etc., etc. The TA has been undertaken using industry standard methodology as far as trip generation and assessment of junctions. I mean, this is a relatively small application. It's generating about 22 peak hour trips. That wouldn't warrant, in some respects, you would say, wouldn't even warrant assessment.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions. There was mention of quite a lot of concrete. Is that concrete rafts for all the dwellings?
Through you, Chair. I think that was in reference to the culvert, if I wasn't mistaken. I think that's the creation of the culvert would be with concrete slabs.
Okay. The flood area, is there any way that we could see where the flood area went up to, or is it just in the old railway embankment, or...?
Through you, Chair, again, I don't think that actually is registered under the Environment Agency maps. It was predicated on purely listening to what representatives said through the consultation. That removed the units out of there. There might be some non-EA maps that do show some levels of flooding, but I'm not sure which ones those might be.
Right, and the other is, I believe it was in 2008, there was a single dwelling that there was planning for on this plot and it was refused. I just wondered, was it simply because it was a single plot on a big area, or was there other reasons?
That was within the Greenbelt previously. This land was taken out of the Greenbelt via the local plan. Just on my previous point as well, just to confirm, the application site is in flood zone map 1 for the Environment Agency, which means there's very limited risk of flooding, just to clarify my comments.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, very briefly, Chair. There are some objections about reading through here. There are some of the 3-story proposed units are too close to the existing property, and their concern is they might be overlooking those property. Can I ask the officer what's the distance between those properties and the proposed 3-story units?
Through you, Chair. So in terms of the 3-story units, if I can show these properly. So on this left-hand side, there are a number of what's called, and this was disputed by some representatives as well, 2.5-story properties whereby they have rooms within their roof space, but they are technically 3 stories. The dwellings to the west on Northorpe Lane are provided with more than 21 metres separation, and the roof lights that serve those properties are a further 2 metres further back into the roof line. So there's, from the 3rd story roof space, it's about 23 metres at the lowest level, but a lot of these units also exceed the back-to-back limits more than that 21 metres as well, and that's categorically set out in the Office of, well, the committee reports as well.
Right, thank you. Chair, the officer have consulted both the statutory and non-statutory bodies. There is a long list of on page 13 and 14 or officer recommendation, officer report. I can see no objection from even statutory or non-statutory body I've never seen before. So looking into those, it's a long list. See the Flood Authority and Yorkshire Water, highway, trees, and all others. So I find it a bit difficult to, as some objectors are asking to defer this for more information. I find it very difficult to defer it for more. I don't think so we get any more information. All information is here. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Just going back to the advice in terms of the land ownership at the verge, certainly not in this committee, but I have experience on the Huddersfield committee of similar situations, and exactly as you've outlined, that's the approach. You know, that advice has been given on land ownership, and I can think of one particular development, which Matthias I'm sure remembers, within the Home Valley, where there was a dispute over a strip of land. So this isn't unusual. I would concur, and certainly from my perspective, you know, I would expect our professionals and experts to be providing us with that expert advice. And as I'm not a barrister, I wouldn't expect to be interrogating information which probably I wouldn't completely have an understanding of. And as much as the objectors, and I understand their view on this, they would have done the same. They would have received expert advice from their barristers. I think it is, well, you know, just a comment, I think, Chair, and something which I've raised before, and it is a sort of unfortunate, I think, development that keeps coming forward, whereby officers within planning are, in a sense, denigrated and seem to be pointed to as acting in a way which is biased in some form or other. And certainly, I'd like to state that that's not my experience of my time on planning, and certainly that doesn't in any way dismiss objections and people's views. And certainly, but I would ask, I think certainly that people take account the fact that we do, you know, take this role extremely seriously. We do interrogate and talk to officers, And I'm grateful to be reminded of our role, but I think, quite honestly, we don't need to be reminded every time we have particular cases. Long-winded way of saying I'm satisfied with the advice on this, and along with Councillor Sokol, I certainly have seen no major, or certainly seen no objections, and I'd be happy to move this on officers' recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I have to say I've also come across on another planning committee, the Heavy Woolen Planning Committee, similar situations where disputes of land ownership have arisen. And as members of this committee, it's really, really it puts us in a very difficult situation when on one hand we're being told by officers things are going to be okay, this is all very well and good, and then the other side of the coin, that somebody is claiming ownership of a piece of land that somebody else wants to develop effectively for part of the application. So with that in mind, and somebody said there was a garage on this site at one point in history, which would suggest that if there was a structure on that part of land, that it would lean towards the owner of the land having had permission at some point for that to be taken. Now, I'm very conscious that I wouldn't want to be making a decision on something that would leave the council open to legal action on that. So I do agree with Councillor Pinnock. I appreciate, we sometimes have to question you on these things, and we're here to make difficult questions. We're not here just to accept that everything will be okay on the night, and I appreciate that sometimes that is the case, sometimes it isn't. But the concerns I have around the verge, I share with Councillor Pinnock, I'm afraid, on that one. So I would be minded to want to see some further clarity on the ownership of that land before approving anything. In terms of the LP24 policy, which I've had some information from Mirfield Town Council on, they're saying that policy LP24 requires proposals to promote good design by ensuring the form, scale, layout and details of all development respects and enhances the character of the townscape, heritage assets and landscape. So with that in mind, what I'm understood to be the objection here is that the character of the buildings is not something that is typical for Kirklees in terms of the high-pitched roofing, which I'm told is a vernacular feature found in the Cotswolds, not in Kirklees. Can I ask officers what has been done to ensure that the design of the buildings is in keeping with the heritage of the area? And in terms of that, could I ask, and this is something that I appreciate hasn't been done, if I'm correct in thinking, I know the Kirklees Council's conservation team have looked at the proposal with regarding Northrop Hall and said it's not, there's no objection with regards to Northrop Hall. Have they assessed the heritage aspect of the design in relation to what's in keeping with the surrounding area? And if they haven't, is that something we could request potentially further down the line? Thank you.
So, through you, Chair, firstly, in respect of design, I think you'll see that this, I think you've got it there. So that's a bit of Google Earth imagery, that's 3D. You'll see it's quite an eclectic mix of properties in this area of Northorpe. So to the south is quite modern development on Northorpe Court, where those buff brick or imitation stone dwellings are. Then the eastern side of Northorpe Lane is typified by a mix of mid-century 1930s style dwelling houses, and then on the opposite side there's the more early 20th, late 19th century terraced housing, and then further north of that is Northrop Hall, which predates most of all of that kind of built environment. If we go down to the site layout, you'll see that the site is significantly set back from the street scene of Northorpe Lane. This is purposeful, and as explained in the presentation, because there were dwellings like cramped in at the entrance, so therefore officers have had consideration of that, and therefore the site creates a lot of its own character because it's set in a backland location. There will be glimpses through the street scene towards the units at the northern part of the site, but these have pitched roofs, and it will be set at lower levels, so it generally accords with the appearance of the area because it is quite eclectic, as I've previously mentioned. In terms of the detailing of the house types themselves, I did touch upon this, but in more broad sense in the presentation. However, the units were a lot more bland and they were identical. However, there's been a lot more detailing in terms of coins and corbels, gables introduced, more verticality to the windows, dressings and sills and lintels all to windows. So there has been a greater variety of materials introduced. So there's render, brick and artificial stone also supposed to be there. That is subject to condition on what the precise details of those materials will be, but that is available on the application. In terms of the impact on Northorpe Hall, if I just bring up a picture here, if you see the right-hand photo, behind that very large, dense foliage is Northorpe Hall and Northorpe Barn, and that is sited directly opposite the picture on the top left, which is the entrance to which will be the entrance site once it's demolished. So therefore, the Northorpe Hall is significantly screened on account of also the access and the dwellings being set significantly back, as indicated on this plan. The impact on Northorpe Hall, Northorpe Trust, and Northorpe Barn and Northorpe Croft is harmful, but it's less than substantial, and this is argued within the officer report. In terms of the consultee response from Design and Conservation, they've provided no objections, as you've correctly cited, and their assessment was purely in terms of heritage impact. So for all those reasons, officers were satisfied that the design of the scheme was sufficient to create less than substantial harm, which was significantly outweighed by the provision of housing infrastructure on the site, which provides for the housing need as identified in the strategic housing market assessment. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Carol?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I have to say that I do accept that this isn't a court of law that does decide on land ownership. And in fact, if I remember my training in terms of planning properly, you don't need to own the land in order to put in an application. Anyone can put in a planning application for any piece of land that they like. And it is then, I mean, for them to sort out ownership if that is required. So I really do agree that it's not for us here to decide whether or not who owns that piece of land. So with that in mind and all the other things that we've heard in terms of no objections, and I'm happy to second this recommendation. And I would just add, I do worry about design. I really want to see good design, but I really worry that not some people, sorry, but that people consider that good design only reflects what's already there, and old and existing buildings and something that's old. I'm really quite happy to see good design in many, many different shapes and materials, etc. And I think, as you say, this site is well set back from Northorpe Hall. It won't impact on it at all. In fact, it will have a better outlook with that house demolished, if it could have an outlook because of the trees. So I'm happy to second this, the recommendations here.
At this point, I'm afraid we're going to have to halt this for 2 minutes. Right, we're back on. I'm determined to get this application done today, one way or another. Andrew, you indicated to speak.
It was just a small point, Chair, that I do worry about this barrister's advice. There are plenty of examples that we have in committee reports of advice being summarised in the report. It will say something as to how that decision was arrived at. So I do worry that we and bearing in mind that it has got outline permission already, that we may be giving permission for something which will have to be stopped at some point because somebody else refuses permission to go on the land. And I mean, if we're happy that we don't think that's going to happen, then yeah, by all means. But I'm not completely happy with the situation we're in on that score, I'm afraid. As far as design's concerned, I think the designs that we've been shown have been really quite nice. They're not all that Cotswold, actually. I don't quite know how that came about, but and if they are, so what?
Right. Well, it has been moved and it has been seconded to take officer's recommendation. So on that, we'll go to a vote.
So this is to approve the application as outlined in the submitted report and also the planning update. So, Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Pinnett.
Against.
Councillor Gray.
Against.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Hall. So that's 4 that have voted for approval, 3 against, so the application is approved.
Next item, page 45. This is Dry Hill Lane, Denbydale, Huddersfield, and it's Callum. Right, Callum.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Colin Harrison, Development Management and Case Officer for application 2022-92557 for the installation of a 1 megawatt ground-mounted solar array and all associated works at Buckley Farm, Buckley Dairy, Foxview, Dry Hill Lane, Denbydale. The application site includes 2 fields associated with Buckley Dairy. The fields within the application cover a site area of 1.5 hectares. The site is set approximately 1 mile as the crow flies from Denbydale Centre. The site is rural and set within the allocated green belt. The fields are set to the north and south of the existing vehicle access from Cloughhouse Lane, which serves the existing farm operation. The fields are relatively flat with protected trees sited along the south-eastern boundary of the southern field just along that boundary there. The rest of the boundaries are enclosed with fencing, walling and some hedgerows. The field to the north of the application site falls away steeply to the north with tall trees beyond it, well, in this distance here. And the fields are currently undeveloped agricultural land. Notwithstanding this, the agricultural value of the land is considered to be grade 4, which states the land has low or poor agricultural value. The site already has a ground source heat pump network set below it. The solar panels will be laid out in 3 zones, as can be seen on screen. The frames will be orientated to face south in rows approximately 5 metres apart with a tilt relevant to the latitude of the site. Inverters will be mounted directly on the framework and positioned at the end of each one of panels. The small substation is proposed to the south of the site, these cells to which are to be conditioned, as are landscaping and screening details. Underground cable installed parallel to the existing access track will connect to the existing export station. The site would also utilise the existing vehicle access points. In regard to the principle of development, solar panels are not covered by any of the exceptions for development in the Greenbelt, thus constitute inappropriate development and encroachment into the Greenbelt. However, officers consider there are very special circumstances for this development. Paragraph 151 of the MPPF states, when located in the Greenbelt, elements of many renewable energy projects will compromise of inappropriate development. In such cases, developers will need to demonstrate very special circumstances if projects are to proceed. Such very special circumstances may include the wider environmental benefits associated with increased production of energy from renewable sources. To contextualise this development, the solar farm will provide sufficient energy to power approximately 300 family homes. However, for complete transparency, the energy produced will serve the existing farm with only excess energy then provided back to the grid. The agent estimates that 58% of the energy would be used to serve Buckley Dairy and 42% provided to the grid. The solar array would also produce enough renewable energy to counter 232 kilograms of CO2 emissions per annum. The MPPF clearly states that authorities should seek to positively deliver renewable and low-carbon technology developments. This is to help tackle climate change and address the environmental role of planning. Local Plan Policy LP26 also sets out the need for low-carbon development. Furthermore, members of this committee will be aware that Kirklees Council declared a climate emergency in 2019. Local Plan Policy LP26 states that renewable and low-carbon energy proposals will be supported and planning permission will be granted where certain criteria are met. In this instance, officers consider that the proposal can be suitably screened by landscaping and planting along all boundaries and within the site. The site is not protected, nor are there any heritage issues. The development would have a very minor impact on traffic given the anticipated construction period being only 6 weeks, with only 4 vehicle trips anticipated per year for future maintenance. Officers consider that the biodiversity net gain can also be achieved. This can be conditioned. The development would also have a positive environmental and economic benefits. As such, it would meet the criteria of LP26. The solar panels themselves will be fixed on metal frames. They'll be set 1 metre above the ground level and have a finished height around 3 metres above the level. The plans submitted on screen do show that they'll be fixed by a concrete base. However, in the last couple of days since the update, we have spoken with the agent, agreed that they'll be fixed via driven or screw piles instead of the concrete base. This can be conditioned or it can be agreed with a plan prior to the actual decision being issued. Subject to the amendments to the fitting to the ground, officers are satisfied with the appearance of the panels. On screen now are just some images of the field. The top left shows the northernmost field, while the image on the right shows the southernmost field. The images on screen there detail some of the existing boundary treatments and screening that are already in place on the site. The top right image shows the tall trees and fields around the northern fields. These offer screening from afar. The bottom left image shows the existing hedgerow and protected trees which screen the site from the junction of Dry Hill Lane and Clough House Lane. As previously mentioned, further screening is sought via conditions also. It should be noted that KC Trees have no objections to the proposed scheme. Overall, officers acknowledge that the proposal would be an appropriate development in the Greenbelt that would harm the openness, albeit this would be low in the medium to long term. Furthermore, through encouraging into the countryside, it will contradict one of the 5 core purposes of the Greenbelt. However, there are clear benefits and very special circumstances of the development. Firstly, the proposed solar farm would generate 1 megawatt of renewable energy. This is a significant contribution to the addressing the climate emergency that the Council has declared and towards meeting local and national policy on reducing carbon emissions, addressing climate change and meeting national obligations. The scheme would also go hand in hand with existing renewable energy sources on the site, namely existing solar panels on this building to the left in grey and the existing heat source pump under the site. The proposed array would utilise existing infrastructure, meaning less ancillary development is also required. Furthermore, the development is set on Grade 4 agricultural land. As such, the development would utilise this poor agricultural land to contribute to meeting the renewable energy needs as previously stated. In closing, the application necessitates a consideration of the planning balance. It is concluded by officers that the harm identified throughout the committee report would be outweighed by the public benefits of this development, namely the energy provision. The benefits would amount to very special circumstances that would justify the granting of planning permission despite the Greenbelt location. Therefore, it is recommended to members of the committee to seek approval for this application subject to the conditions outlined in the committee report and then superseded within the update. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. We've got one speaker, and that is Richard Corbett, who's on Teams.
Good afternoon, how are you? You well?
Hear you loud and clear, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. We agree with the recommendation of your officers and are very thankful for the excellent report and presentation from the planning officer that you've just heard. This is a planning application for a 1 megawatt solar array on approximately 4 acres of land at Buckley Dairy, Foxview, Denby Dale. Buckley Dairy is a large-scale dairy and beef farm which has been operating from the site for over 60 years. The applicant considered many things when they were choosing the site and the requirements for a 1 megawatt solar array based on technical and operation requirements that have informed the site selection process. Firstly, the sunlight and intensity levels. The site is well located geographically for solar gain. It's flat and free of landscape features that would cause overshadowing. There is a grid connection, which for all of these type of developments is imperative. There's good road access for construction and routine maintenance and eventually decommissioning. There are no environmental constraints, and importantly, the site is designated as Grade 4 land, which is poor. And furthermore, the chosen site is located in a poor area of the field and as such extremely suitable for this development. The site will still be farmed as wildflower pollinator bird food mixes will be sown and sheep will graze the area at appropriate times of the year. There are many environmental benefits of the scheme, including reducing carbon emissions, air quality improvements, and as mentioned previously, the site is changing from a single annual crop to being sown with wildflower mixes, which will result in an improvement on the environment of flora and fauna, and also a biodiversity net gain improvement from the development. There are obviously economic benefits to the applicant, which include the reduced reliance on expensive, predominantly fossil fuel imported electricity, as we're all more than aware of at the moment. It helps to maintain the jobs that are on the farm at the moment. It also, which is very important on dairy farms, it increases the security and reliability of supply through them having an independent supply with a fear of blackouts, etc. Economic gains or penalties may soon be linked to farm carbon balances and carbon neutrality. So this is another important step for the farm in moving forward. The proposal is a farm diversification scheme. The business wishes to further improve the sustainability of the farm to ensure they are utilising their available resources to provide renewable energy, together with gaining additional farm income by reducing the reliance on imported electricity and for future-proofing the business. The generation of renewable energy through the operation of the proposed solar scheme would benefit the applicant and help secure a future of a family farm and business. We know the Kirklees Council declared a climate emergency in 2019. And as your officer has excellently put, there is a need for renewable energy infrastructure throughout the country, and this is supported by the National Planning Policy Framework and the local plans. And
you wrap up now, please.
I'm not going to repeat all the policy. No. Your officer went through it all excellently, so we hope that you're able to support the application subject to the conditions proposed. And thank you very much for your time.
Right, thank you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to hear that we've got some agricultural land classification information on this site. Sorry, I just thought I would mention that. And clearly, yes, it is in theory undesirable in the Greenbelt, but I think this is a good use of what is poor land. I would like to move the officer's recommendation, including the condition about the fixings of the rather than concrete. I think that's going a bit far, to be perfectly honest. But something less brutal would be much more acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to say it's not right nice condition in piles, is it? Not really. Right, I've got Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just a couple of observations more than anything. One is, surely at this time we could think a better use of using land when we're only 66% self-sustainable as far as food source in this country is concerned, and it looks like there's got to be food shortages in Europe throughout next year and going into 2025. The other one is, as far as solar panels, I'd never ever support anything going through as solar panels until we know where those solar panels are sourced from, because 80% of the world's solar panels, as I said in council the other day, are manufactured in China in forced labour camps, so I'd never be able to support anything that went through as far as solar energy until we know that where those are sourced from. So I would move that we refuse this plan, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yep, very much in agreement with Councillor Pinnock. Certainly, we support this. I'm very happy to second this. Just one point, I was quite surprised in 10.63 that the applicant have not submitted an ecological report or information. I gather it's in the condition. I'm sure it will, but I'm just a little bit surprised at that. And I think, you know, just in terms of future reference, it would be good if we could put a bit more pressure to make sure that's up front. I know it will be done as such, but that's my only comment. In terms of planning considerations, I understand Councillor Thompson's views on things, but I really don't think that's a material planning issue in terms of where particular bits of equipment are sourced from, but absolutely can understand his ethical views on that.
Was moved by Councillor Pinnock, seconded by Councillor Davies. So we'll go to a vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is a vote to approve the recommendation as outlined in the submitted report. So Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Craig.
For.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Hall.
For.
Okay, so that application is approved, 6 votes to 1.
Right, thanks everybody for today, and we'll see you next year. We can do it all again, hopefully a bit warmer.